6:14 a.m., Southern Caribbean Sea. The horizon is open, the water is calm, and nothing about the morning hints that the situation is about to tighten. Inside the Combat Information Center of a U.S. Navy surface ship, the radar picture looks stable right up until it changes. A new surface contact appears near the edge of the screen. Then another, then a third. 3 separate returns, close together, similar in profile, all coming from the same bearing. The watch officer does not raise his voice. He does not need to. He leans closer to the display. The contacts are moving faster than expected. At first, they seem routine, small naval vessels, the kind that patrol regional waters every day. But within seconds, the system updates their vectors. Speed increases. Headings shift. The 3 tracks begin to close in, not randomly, but with purpose. The combat system identifies them automatically. Venezuelan Navy surface vessels. Older hulls, limited displacement, conventional deck armament. No launch signatures detected. Range, 21 nautical miles and closing. The U.S. ship keeps its course and speed unchanged. No deviation, no shift in posture. Under international law, there is no reason to maneuver. This is a lawful transit in international waters, planned and logged well in advance. The officer of the deck asks for confirmation. Verify CPA. The Combat Information Center runs the numbers. Closest point of approach is shrinking. If all 3 ships continue on their present headings, they will pass well inside normal safety margins. At sea, distance is never just distance. It suggests intent. At 06:18, the Venezuelan ships increase speed again, almost at the same moment. That is when the room grows noticeably quieter. Speed alone does not confirm hostility, but coordinated acceleration sends a message, especially when it happens across multiple hulls at once. The tactical picture updates live. 1 ship drifts to port, 1 holds the center line, 1 edges starboard. It is not an outright assault pattern, but it is not routine navigation either. It is pressure. The bridge is informed. Long-range optics come online. High-resolution cameras pull crisp images from the morning haze. Hull numbers begin to sharpen. Deck mounts become visible. Movement on deck can be seen clearly. Everything is recorded. At 06:21, the first bridge-to-bridge call goes out. Venezuelan naval vessels, this is a United States Navy ship operating in international waters. You are approaching at high speed. State your intentions. No reply. The call is repeated in Spanish. Again, nothing. The silence is noted, time-stamped, and entered into the log. The ship's posture remains steady. No systems are trained, no alarms are sounded. But inside the Combat Information Center, the ship is now fully alert. Electronic support measures begin passive collection. Any radar activity from the approaching vessels is captured, labeled, and stored. The system does not interfere. It listens. At sea, every platform reveals something, whether it intends to or not. By 06:24, the range drops below 15 nautical miles. The Venezuelan vessels are now maneuvering clearly. Their courses are no longer parallel. They are shaping the encounter, narrowing space, and reducing options. This is not accidental seamanship. The commanding officer enters CIC. He does not ask for a summary. He studies the display and gives a simple order. Maintain ROE, log everything. The rules of engagement are clear. The U.S. Navy does not escalate unless there is no other choice. Presence comes first, documentation comes before action. Another radio call goes out, still no response. At this distance, even minor errors matter. A sudden turn, a late correction, a misunderstood signal. Steel does not stop quickly, and collisions do not care about politics. The nearest Venezuelan vessel adjusts course by just 3 degrees, enough to tighten the geometry again. CPA drops further, 6 minutes to closest approach. The threat board updates. Still no fire control radar, no crew visibly manning deck weapons, but posture is shifting, and posture is information. This is the point experienced professionals recognize immediately. Not a battle, not yet, but the narrow space before choices begin to matter. The U.S. ship holds steady. Engines remain at constant RPM. The helm does not move. On the surface, almost nothing changes. But below deck, every sensor is fixed on the encounter. Every second is being preserved. Every movement is being captured in high-definition detail. 3 naval vessels are rushing a U.S. Navy ship in international waters. And for the first time that morning, everyone in the room understands the same thing. Whatever happens next will be remembered. By 6:27 a.m., the range falls through 12 nautical miles. At that distance, navigation stops being abstract. Every turn carries meaning. Every knot of speed counts. Hulls moving above 20 knots leave little room for hesitation. Inside CIC, the plot tightens further. The 3 Venezuelan ships are no longer behaving like independent contacts. Their movement is now linked, subtle, coordinated, deliberate. One holds the center line and continues straight in. One shades to port, trimming distance. The third slides starboard, widening the angle. It is not a textbook formation, but it is more than enough to create pressure. The combat systems officer says it calmly. Contacts are shaping geometry. The language is clinical, the meaning is not. CPA drops again, now below 2 nautical miles. At sea, that matters. 2 miles is not much room. It is close enough for a misunderstanding to become an incident. Close enough that intent must be assumed, not guessed. The bridge receives the update. The officer of the deck acknowledges without comment. Course remains unchanged. Speed remains unchanged. The U.S. ship does not blink first. At 0629, the commanding officer orders the next step. Not escalation, but presence. Prep aviation. On the flight deck, the order moves quickly. The MH-60 Seahawk crew is already awake and tracking the situation through internal communications. Gear is checked, systems come online. The helicopter does not launch immediately, but readiness shifts from standby to immediate response. Back in CIC, the optics sharpen again. Faces can now be made out on the Venezuelan decks. Sailors move near the railings. One deck mount rotates a few degrees, not actively manned, but no longer fully stowed. That movement is logged. Another bridge-to-bridge call is transmitted, shorter this time and more direct. Venezuelan naval vessels, you are conducting unsafe maneuvers. Alter course immediately. Again, no reply. Electronic support measures pick up faint emissions. Surface search radar. Low power. Intermittent. Not a targeting lock, but enough to confirm active tracking. The electronic warfare officer reports it. The data is captured, tagged, and archived automatically. Every pulse becomes part of the record. At 0632, the center Venezuelan ship increases speed again. Just 2 knots, but enough to matter. The portside vessel tightens its angle. CPA drops below 1.5 nautical miles. Time to CPA, 4 minutes. This is no longer routine shadowing. Shadowing keeps distance. This reduces it. The commanding officer watches the display and gives the next order in an even tone. Launch the helo. On the flight deck, rotors spin up. The Seahawk lifts cleanly into the air and banks low over the water. No visible offensive posture, no dramatic move, just sensors, cameras, and authority. From above, the entire geometry changes instantly. The helicopter's FLIR locks onto the nearest Venezuelan ship. Heat signatures sharpen into clarity. Engine exhaust, bridge windows, crew movement. Everything is captured in stabilized, high-resolution imagery. This is not intimidation. It is documentation. The Seahawk settles into position off the Venezuelan ship's bow quarter, holding altitude a few hundred feet above the sea. Close enough to be seen, far enough to remain safe. A green laser pulses briefly, non-lethal and unmistakable, tracing across the bridge windows before moving off. The radio comes alive. Venezuelan naval vessel. This is a United States Navy helicopter. You are operating unsafely in international waters. Your actions are being recorded. The message is repeated in Spanish. For the first time since initial contact, something changes. On the Venezuelan deck, sailors pause. One steps back from the rail, another turns toward the bridge. The deck mount stops moving. Speed begins to ease off slowly and deliberately. CIC confirms it. Center contact reducing speed. The portside vessel holds course but stops pressing inward. The starboard ship opens its angle by a degree. Only slightly, but enough to notice. It is not a withdrawal, but it is hesitation. The Seahawk holds position. Cameras remain steady. Sensors continue rolling. Nothing is rushed, nothing is threatened. The helicopter does not chase. It simply stays there. Above, the message is clear without a single shot. Below, the U.S. ship continues along its original course, exactly as it had since first contact. At 0636, CPA begins to increase. The geometry loosens. The pressure breaks, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Inside CIC, the watch team does not celebrate. They do not speak much at all. They keep logging, recording, and watching. Because at sea, moments like this are not judged by what almost happened. They are judged by who controlled what happened next. By 0638, the distance is opening. Not quickly, not dramatically, but enough to register. On the tactical display, the 3 Venezuelan ships are no longer closing in. Their headings begin to separate by degrees. Small changes, but decisive ones. This is the turning point. The Seahawk remains on station, orbiting calmly above the water. It is not pursuing because it does not need to. Its sensors are already doing their job. Every frame is being stored, every movement is time-stamped, every decision is now part of the permanent record. The lead Venezuelan ship slows again, from 24 knots to 20. Its wake shortens. The bow settles slightly deeper into the water. That one change alters the geometry more effectively than any radio call could. CIC confirms it. Contact 1 slowing, CPA increasing. The portside ship maintains course but stops edging inward. The starboard vessel drifts wider, opening lateral separation. The three ships are no longer acting like a single shape. The pressure pattern is dissolving. On the bridge of the U.S. ship, nothing changes. Course steady, speed constant. No victory turn, no pursuit. No reaction beyond professional discipline. In naval encounters, that matters. Escalation is not defined by movement alone. It is defined by restraint. The Seahawk shifts slightly to maintain visual coverage of all three ships. Sensors sweep across decks, antennas, and exhaust stacks. No systems appear manned. No fire control radar is detected. The electronic warfare officer confirms it. Clean, passive only. That confirmation matters. The commanding officer acknowledges with a nod. The helicopter remains airborne. Recording continues. At 0641, the first transmission comes from the Venezuelan side. It is short, careful, and measured. United States naval vessel, we are conducting routine patrol operations in proximity to Venezuelan waters. It is not an apology. It is not an admission. It is something else. It is a step back. The response from the U.S. ship is immediate and precise. Venezuelan naval vessels, this is a United States Navy ship conducting lawful transit in international waters. Your maneuvers have been recorded. Maintain safe distance. No extra words, no emotion, no negotiation. The channel falls silent again. But it is a different kind of silence now. The Venezuelan ships continue opening distance. Their wakes spread wider. Their angles soften. What had looked like convergence half an hour earlier now resembles routine separation. At 0644, the Seahawk makes one final orbit. Its mission is complete. The sensors have captured everything needed. Visual evidence, electronic data, position logs. The helicopter turns smoothly back toward the ship. No flourish, no dramatic signal, just procedure. Recovery crews are already in place on deck. The Seahawk touches down, rotors slowing as sailors move in with practiced precision. Data cards are removed immediately and passed below. The evidence chain begins without delay. Inside CIC, analysts replay key moments, course changes, speed shifts, laser designation, timestamps, radar emissions. The encounter is no longer just recollection. It is a record. By 0648, the nearest Venezuelan vessel is more than 5 nautical miles off the starboard quarter. The other two are widening farther out. None make another move to close the distance. The situation is resolved, but not through force. That is the part most people miss. Nothing happened in the way headlines usually prefer. No rounds were fired, no systems were pointed, no alarms screamed, and yet everything changed. Control shifted the moment the encounter stopped being ambiguous. The moment intent was documented. The moment every action was logged. The moment escalation lost its anonymity. For Venezuela, continuing at that point would have meant something different. Any further movement would no longer be open to interpretation. It would be evidence. For the U.S. Navy, the objective had already been achieved. Maintain presence, avoid escalation, document everything. At 0652, the bridge reports that the Venezuelan ships are maintaining separation. The commanding officer gives a single instruction: resume normal watch. The ship continues its transit exactly as planned hours earlier. Engines steady, course true, no deviation. Behind it, 3 Venezuelan naval ships remain on radar, but no longer matter to the situation. The encounter is over, not because one side was louder, and not because one side appeared stronger in the moment, but because one side controlled the point where pressure became proof. And at sea, proof lasts longer than intimidation. By 7:02 a.m., the encounter is no longer active. The 3 Venezuelan ships remain visible on radar, but their tracks are stable, widening, predictable. No further acceleration, no converging headings, no new attempt to compress the geometry. From a distance, it might look uneventful. Up close, it was decisive. Inside CIC, the focus shifts from reaction to assessment. The question is no longer what is happening, but why it ended the way it did. The answer is not raw firepower. On paper, the U.S. Navy ship holds a clear advantage. Advanced sensors, integrated combat systems, layered defense. None of that had to be used. What mattered was control. Modern naval encounters are rarely decided by who can act first. More often, they are decided by who defines the escalation narrative without crossing into open conflict. For Venezuela, continuing the approach would have brought immediate consequences, not just tactical, but strategic. Every maneuver had been recorded, every heading change logged, every second timestamped. The Seahawk's sensors did not merely observe, they archived. High-resolution imagery of deck activity, bridge posture, and mount orientation had already been stored. Electronic support measures captured radar emissions and communication patterns. Position data fixed the encounter in geographic fact. That changed everything. As long as the encounter lived inside ambiguity, Venezuela could apply pressure without owning it. A close pass could be explained away as coincidence. Speed changes could be framed as navigation. Silence on the radio could be written off as confusion. That ambiguity disappeared the moment the documentation became undeniable. From that point on, escalation would not be interpreted. It would be proven. This is where modern naval power quietly makes its point. The U.S. Navy did not threaten. It did not pursue. It did not answer pressure with more pressure. It created a record. And that record would matter far beyond the horizon. It could be reviewed by commanders, legal authorities, and diplomatic channels. In an era when maritime incidents are examined frame by frame, evidence carries more weight than rhetoric. For the Venezuelan commanders at sea, the calculation changed instantly. Any additional aggressive move would no longer be a message. It would be an incident. And incidents invite scrutiny. They narrow options. They trigger consequences. Backing off did not mean surrender. It meant reclaiming control over what came next. From the U.S. Navy's point of view, the outcome aligned perfectly with doctrine. Presence before pressure, pressure before force, force only when no alternative remains. The encounter demonstrated what restraint looks like when it is backed by capability. The American ship never altered course, never raised its voice, never displayed unnecessary force. That steadiness was not passive. It was deliberate. By refusing to mirror aggression, the U.S. Navy denied Venezuela the escalation it may have been trying to create. There was no dramatic overreaction to exploit, no confrontation to frame, no visual of force meeting force. Instead, there was discipline. That matters, especially in a region where symbolism can be as valuable as tactics. A dramatic close pass on video can be turned into messaging. A sharp response can be reframed as provocation. But restraint offers little to twist. The Venezuelan ships were given room to disengage without humiliation. No chase followed, no prolonged shadowing beyond safe distance. The separation was clean. That too was intentional. Escalation control is not just about preventing conflict. It is about shaping what follows after the moment passes. By 0708, analysts aboard the U.S. ship had already begun packaging the data. Sensor logs, video clips, radar tracks, communication transcripts. Everything categorized, everything secured. Later, far from the pressure of the moment, the encounter would be reviewed in detail. Patterns would be compared with earlier interactions. Intent would be judged not by emotion, but by evidence. For Venezuela, that carried an uncomfortable message. They had tested the boundary and discovered it was firm, not because of shots or threats, but because of discipline and documentation. The lesson was subtle, but unmistakable. The U.S. Navy does not need to escalate to control an encounter. It only needs to remain present, professional, and ready to prove exactly what happened. By the time the Venezuelan ships faded farther into the background, the key moment had already passed. The pressure had been applied. The response had been measured. The outcome had been set. No one on either side needed to say it aloud. Because at sea, the side that controls the record controls the story. And once the story is written clearly, it is very difficult to challenge it later. By 7:15 a.m., the Caribbean has returned to stillness. The radar picture is clean. The three Venezuelan ships remain present, but distant. Their courses are steady. Separation continues to widen. The moment of compression is over. For the U.S. Navy ship, the mission never changed. Course held, speed constant, transit uninterrupted. From the outside, it looks ordinary, just another gray hull moving through open water. Inside, the encounter is already history, cataloged, archived, and understood. The MH-60 Seahawk is secured on deck. Its data has been transferred, verified, and stored. Video feeds are indexed by time and position. Radar tracks are matched with navigation logs. Electronic emissions are tagged and compared against known profiles. Nothing dramatic remains, and that is exactly the point. Modern naval encounters are no longer about spectacle. They are about clarity, about who can operate closest to the edge without crossing it, and who can prove where that edge was. This encounter sent a message, but not the kind delivered by missiles or warning shots. It demonstrated restraint backed by capability. For Venezuela, the lesson was not that the U.S. Navy is stronger. That much was never in doubt. The lesson was that pressure without escalation loses its value the moment it becomes accountable. Once actions are recorded, options narrow. Once intent is logged, ambiguity disappears. And once ambiguity disappears, escalation stops being useful. The three ships that surged in earlier did not turn away because they were directly threatened. They turned away because continuing would have meant owning the consequences of whatever happened next. That distinction matters. The U.S. Navy did not go looking for confrontation. It did not react emotionally. It did not try to dominate the moment through force. It allowed the other side to decide how far to go, while making certain that every decision would be documented permanently. That is how control is exercised at sea in the 21st century. As the ship continues its transit, the crew returns to normal rhythm. Watches rotate, logs are updated, meals are served. Professionalism does not switch off because professionalism is the posture. For the sailors who were on watch during the encounter, there is no celebration. There rarely is. Close approaches are part of the job. Managing them correctly is the standard, not the exception. What matters is that the ship remained predictable, that every response matched doctrine, and that every action left no room for misreading. That is how escalation is prevented, not by dominance alone, but by discipline. Somewhere beyond the horizon, 3 Venezuelan ships continue their patrols. Their crews now carry first-hand experience of how quickly pressure can become proof, and how narrow the room for maneuver becomes once that happens. The encounter will be reviewed on both sides. Analysts will study the data, commanders will draw conclusions, patterns will be added to databases. Nothing will be forgotten. That is the lasting effect of moments like this. No headlines were written in the moment, no emergency alerts went out, no shots were fired, and still, the impact travels far beyond the point of contact, because every future approach will now be measured against this one. Every future calculation will include the knowledge that restraint is not passivity, and silence is not absence. The U.S. Navy ship disappears slowly into the distance, maintaining the same heading it held before the first radar contact appeared hours earlier. The sea closes behind it. The message remains. At sea, power is not proven by how quickly you rush in. It is proven by how calmly you hold your course and how completely you document the moment when someone tests it. And when the moment passes, as it did here, the most important part is not what almost happened. It is what was prevented. Because sometimes the strongest statement a Navy can make is to leave no doubt without leaving a mark.